Hello and welcome to this academic forum. My name is Sergio del Angel and I am going to introduce some main topics, and the content we will see in this forum. We divide this video in 5 main topics: observation, interview, participation, conclusion, and our reference. So let's get started.
Hello everyone, my name is Yamili Ramírez Flores and I'm in first grade group 3. Observation is a discipline that burns a lot of time ago since middle age, and it works in a scenario in which develop its basic principally in a determined space. It's the balance between that we are watching and that we are going to talking about. Some key data for making observations are scenarios or places. Those determine the space that we're going to analyze and all around it. People. Basically, these are going to be all the organisms that we want to study and which we need a full analysis about the behavior, and that takes place in a certain scenario. The dialogue. This is the way that exists to communicate and interact with other personalities. In this way, we can express our feelings or our emotions about a particular situation. And finally, the actions, that which needs to realize in the humble, empathic, and comprehensive way to create a bond in the ambience. Basically are going to be the things that a people is going to do in that determined space.
Hello, my name is Keila Mildreth Vicente Huerta, and I am a student of the School Normal 4 in the degree of English. Welcome. Well, I will follow up on the topic mentioned above by my partner, but with the difference that I will give rise to participant observation within the field. I want to clarify that in this case the scenario were virtual. Okay, most observers must enter the field without a specific hypothesis and preconception, as suggested by Taylor and Botgan in 1989. Entering the field. Observers enter the field in the hope of establishing open relationship with the informants. It is important to mention that many of the techniques used in participant observation correspond to everyday rules about non-offensive social interaction. In the first days of this practice, you should make sure that people feel comfortable, that is adapt a little to their rhythm. Likewise, during the initial period, data collection as a secondary level to get to know the scenario and the people when entering the field for the first time. Research receive information in large quantity, so it is recommended to limit the time that is spent in the scenario as the observer becomes familiar with a scenario. The information obtained will be gathered. For this, there are techniques that I will mention below. One of the most important is the negotiation of one's overall. That is, to establishing a balance between the variants proposed by the research. In this case, is what, when, and who to observe, and establish the benefit of rapport. Rapport is the next point that is important, since it will depend on whether people open up and express their feelings sincerely, as mentioned John Jackson in 1975, cited by Taylor and Botgan in 1989. Rapport and trust can grow and shrink in the course of the fieldwork, and how we communicate the empathy for the informants and get them to accept it is a sensor we depend on this goes hand in hand with reverence the routine, that is to accommodate their routines and ways of doing things of the informants, be freely interested in what informants do or do. It is worth mentioning that it's important to put a boundary between establishing rapport and being treated as a puppet. Once the rapport has been established with the majority in the format, it's important to recognize key informants, since this will be the primary source of the research and therefore a key piece for a good observation in specific points, and to be able to have the notes as a product or field, here to call it file diary, that are the record of each observation. This must be complete, precise, and detailed. These notes provide data on the outcome, the observation, so an effort should be made to write fairly descriptive and comprehensive notes. Well, in the development of this tool, there are certain suggestions that were taken into account by Taylor and Botgan in order to obtain complete grades, and they were carried off their scores. Write down keywords, that is, words that stand out to be to remember easy. For example, dirty. Draw diagrams, chart the movement of the main actors. The next is pay attention, is focused on observing. It is important to establish your own way of writing the notes, and this will depend on meaning to locate data according to its category. For example, use quotes for snips spoken by informants, the use of pseudonyms, the research comments placed between parentheses and the initial letters C.O. At this point is important in that the description made of people and settings should be carefully descriptive. The riddle of the field is not established in a concrete way, since it changes according to the amount of information to be obtained. The observation of some online classes from where we were able to collect data having as a reference the information.
Hello, my name is Ediel Simón Mendoza, and I will tell you a little about the interviews. First, I will mention that the interview is a conversation that is held with a definite purpose, and as such, it is a two-way affair, a plain exchange of expression. The interview is a tool used to acquire knowledge about social life, usually in verbal stories, and basically, we can say that the interview is a discursive activity. Um, the importance of the interview uh, is to obtain more truthful information than any other investigative technique. Whatever the specific purpose on the interview, the objectives will always be the same: obtain information, establish a relationship of empathy, determine the identity of the subject, and record information. Now, I will ask the following question. What we have to do during the interview? Okay, the answer is to watch and ask. Why? Because by observing, we can obtain information that the interviewee expresses not only verbally, but also the behavior that accompanies the interview. I mean, general body language. And when asking is practically the most direct means of obtaining information. The proper handling of the question acquires great importance and requires great skill since the way in which the question is formulated can profoundly affect the answer that is received. Remember that there are two types of questions, open and closed. Now, I'll mention about the in-depth interview. In-depth interviews are face-to-face encounter between the researcher and the informants. Okay, uh, there are three types of the independent interviews. The first, life story or autobiography. The second, learning about events and activities that are not directly observable. And the third, provide a broad picture of settings, situation, or people. Um, for the first step of in-depth interview, the researcher tries to learn the silent experience in a person's life and the definitions that person applies to those experience. In the second type of the in-depth interview, learning occurs with the interlocutors who are informants who act as observers of the researcher. They are his eyes and ears in the field because the activities for the researcher are not directly observable. Then the informant must describe what happens to the researcher. The third type of in-depth interview consists of the study of a relatively large number of people in a short period of time. A broad picture of perspective of people's situation or scenarios is analyzed. Finally, I will mention four important points that stand out in the in-depth interview method. Uh, the first is about research interest. Since the interest must be clear and well defined because they can be broad and having the defined interest to investigate. The investigation will be much better. For this, it is suggested that in-depth interviews go hand in hand with participant observation. Okay? The second point, the settings or the people are not accessible in any other way. Since in-depth interview are used when you want to study past events or you cannot access a particular type of setting or people. The very important point in this method of in-depth interview is that the researcher has time limitations. Here, the researcher must measure their time to be able to carry out an in-depth interview. Science from locating the settings, negotiation access, arranging visits, and getting to know information. It requires limit time. Okay. The fourth And last important point, the investigation depends on a wide variety of settings or people, as the researcher seeks the understanding that is obtained intensively focused on several settings or people and not just one. Taking into account these four relevant points for the in-depth interview method, very good information can be obtained.
Hi, my name is Lucía, and I have to talk about the aspects to be done during the interview. The first part is try to avoid a situation where you speak naturally with the informant, establish the record. Is the appropriate way of approaching informants so that interaction is not false. Second point, do not open try. It is always having the objectivity of the research work. 3 point, allow people to speak, allowing people to unload without having to cut. The third of the conversation is to let the conversation flow. Pay attention. We allow you to obtain more information in the time. Be sensitive. You show interest in the narrative stories, sounding the noise that may occur during the interview. Cross-check is to verify that the information provided is correct and consistent with what was said. Record interview. You have the possibility either to record the interview in audio or video in order to have an easy of remembering the events that have arisen. Interview diary. It is the tool where the research relates to obtain information, and it is a record that contains specific characteristics in order to research a reflection. Metalinguistic and dialogue used in the interview. Metalinguistic is there are the scenes within the discursive, the interpretation that focus within each scenario. Dialogical enunciation is dialogical. The flexive our language allow the use of colloquial and even domestic expression.
Hello, my name is Nancy, and I will talk to you about interpretation of subtopics or segments. The interpretation of subtopics or segments. The concept of interpretation can be seen as the form of a material content already obtained and given to retake it and to make it. Again, a different structure expressing it is another way. We change employment in the interpretation. A table containing 3 sections was created. The first was put as a sequence where the points of view, the options of the students, the learning impediments, and the means or tools used for the learning are placed. As subtopics in the second categories were named guided sequences, tracing various specifications according to the different responses of the students, and that are like to those in the first row. And the third was put as stories of the interviewers. The respective arguments of the interviewers were placed since the answers were different. This section was created to place them where it made sense or where they fit, and at the same time assimilating in the categories according to their context, obtained having the options of the interviewers main base. The various responses obtained are evaluated in detail once this has been passed to date collection to
integrate them and they find similarities. Since it is more feasible to have the date in an orderly and standardized way.
Good morning, dear teachers. My name is Leal Trejo, and today I'm going to talk about two important themes. The first is about data processing, and the second is about interview analysis. Right. I will start with the first topic, data processing. We have to note that this is a three-step process. The first step is category construction. The second step is effect central themes with logical relationships. And the third and last step is carrying out the coding. Now we can move on the second theme, interview analysis. Once the data is collected or during the data collection process itself, researchers should try to empathize with the rules of multiple meanings present in the material, create hypotheses and theories, and also reduce the complexity of social reality. The characteristics of the variables are collected in the matrix to proceed with the coding. There are two analysis practices. In the first analysis practice, it's a first contact with the material, throughout description, ordering, and restructuring. Students become familiar with the collect data and prepare the way for further understandable analysis. The second analysis practice focuses on the interpretations of the material. It is considered an essential step to enter in the world of social meanings. This practice requires prior descriptive analysis and should help develop interpretations in an organized, intersubjectively understandable, and transparent manner.
Conclusion. As we can see on the observations and the interviews that we made in this whole work, the pandemic changed a lot of things. For example, the teaching and the learning process, the students and the teachers have to implement and use new platforms and new tools for this new online way of learning. And the interviews we see more closer the point of view of the students. We see that the learning was affected in a very bad way, well, mostly cases in a badly way, because, and also we see why: the lack of communication, the bad internet, the or it could be just like the students just see uninterested in learning in this online way. So yeah, and also to through this forum and through this semester, we see that we knew and we learned how to use and try to understand some tools for interviews and observation. For example, we use interviews notes, we use recordings, we use transcription. We also make this way of writing down the interviews and analyze them. Also, in the observation, we made something called matriz de observación. We learn about interviews and the dialogue, the importance of the dialogue, and also in observation we see the importance of the rapport, of the communication, of all the things that we need to observate an interview. And I think that's all. And that's all for today's forum. I hope that will be useful to anyone, and hope you enjoy and you like it. Thanks for watching, and that's all for today. Goodbye.